Hello, and welcome back to the 6-5 Summit. I'm Shelley Kramer, one of the founding partners here at Futurum Research, and on behalf of my team at Futurum and the team at More Insights and Strategy, welcome. We're glad to have you. In this spotlight session, Futurum's Daniel Newman sits down with the Groq CEO, Jonathan Ross. Their conversation revolves around why accelerator startups are instrumental right now, especially those related to customer workloads and the GPU supply chain issue. This is a timely conversation and one that I am sure you'll enjoy. Let's get to it.
Jonathan Ross, CEO Groq, welcome back to the 2022 6-5 Summit. So excited to have you here once again. How are you?
Good. Love being here. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun having you on last year. I'm hoping this conversation will be, once again, very entertaining in a field and an area of a lot of interest. Semiconductors obviously has had a ton of attention over the pandemic, and AI is you really can't go a day now, even as the average person not in technology, and not hear about how AI is going to change our lives. So it is companies like yours that are building technologies that are going to really bring a lot of that possibility to reality. And so that's what we're going to talk about here today. Now, it has been a year. You are a startup, and a year is an eternity in the world of a startup. So any quick highlights, anything over the last year that, since we last talked that you really want the world to know?
Sure. And I think a year in startup terms is like 7 in big company terms or something, right?
Like dog years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So lots of things to highlight. Our compiler's making tons of progress. We started with a compiler. We've actually had some experiences recently where we talked to a customer. They've spent 6 months working with Nvidia to tune their models to get them to work performantly. We just had one where it was 6 months for Nvidia and it was 10 days for us, and then we beat Nvidia by 6x. So it's all about software, right? That's super important. Hiring's been great. I know people have been saying it's one of the hardest times to hire ever in history. I don't think that really matters when you're going for talent density. Really great people just want to work with other really great people. Although, of course, hiring might get a little bit easier soon. We've started shipping some product to a whole bunch of different verticals and getting feedback and learning. And that's what it's about. The speed of iteration is the speed of innovation. So we just want to get stuff out there, get it in people's hands, find out, and iterate.
Well, you've got customers signing up, which means you're not just an idea. You've got revenue.
We hit our revenue target for the first time last quarter.
I mean, that's pretty massive in this. And by the way, you kind of subtly talked about talent getting more accessible, and that's because the market is, likely going to see some contraction, which is going to separate the winners and losers in many ways in this, especially in startups, because it's going to get harder to come by money. That free flowing capital is not going to be there. Features that were becoming companies will probably not get funded, and they're going to have to get back to the drawing board. And the companies that are really robust are going to see a wave of investors that are going to want to get involved because they're going to all be kind of chasing the same few, right? The ones that are building good technology, that have customers, that are winning business, and that have a lot of long-term promise. And that's what we're seeing here. And of course, you also introduced a cloud solution. So for the customers that want to be able to access Groq in a more consumable way, that's been launched as well. So that was pretty cool. I think I heard about that at the recent Groq Day. I want to start off because we don't have a ton of time, Jonathan, and I do want to cover a lot of ground. So I want to talk a little bit about supply chain.
Sure.
The GPU has been one of the things that has really struggled under the resiliency issues in the supply chain. Of course, you're just starting to ship, as you mentioned, but you are. How are you kind of navigating that, and how are customers of Groq navigating what's going on in the supply chain?
Well, first off, every company is suffering. Big companies, small companies, doesn't matter. If you're shipping product, then you're having supply chain issues, period. The real difference is how the supply chain issue manifests. And what I mean by that is if we're going to ship a certain amount of silicon, if we can get more out of that silicon for a customer's problems, then you don't need as much silicon, and therefore you can more easily solve it. So as an example, we have one customer that was able to get about a 300x performance boost by using our chip. That was Argonne National Labs. We did some press around that, and that means that you can ship one wafer worth of silicon rather than 300. That's a massive difference, and that's a way to reduce pressure on the supply chain. We have another customer that got a 2000x, right? And so the idea here is it's not just about how much silicon is shipped, it's about what's on the silicon.
Yeah, it's volume, right? I mean, we hear a lot about this. It's like, I had an interesting conversation about memory recently, and it's like, you know, you can have all the cores in the world, but if you can't, you don't have enough memory to support it, you know, you're never going to get the performance if you can't get access to the memory to get the data. So it's these things that people don't always think about. You know, we love volume, we love size, we love big numbers, but in the end, that's not always the result. I'm going to come back to that, by the way, those performant numbers that you just shared. I'm going to come back to that. So give me a second, because I'm going to ask you about that. But you know, last year, Jonathan, you're a little bit quippy. So, you know, I want to use a Groq analogy, but last year you made a kind of a quip about, or it's not even a quip, it's really your strategy, right? Bringing the cost of compute to zero. This year, I think it was a Groq day, you made another comment. You said, accelerating the accelerators. Architecture, or what's going on there? What are you saying when you say accelerating the accelerators?
Well, I think a great example of this is the whole supply chain discussion as well, right? So, you know, if you think about it, CPUs can run at a certain rate, and they're very general, they're very easy to program. And so if you could run everything efficiently enough, you would use CPUs, but you can't get enough performance, right? And so there are people who use GPUs in order to get a little more performance on their workloads. Now, those GPUs won't actually accelerate every workload, but they'll accelerate a lot of the most expensive ones. And so at Groq, we've developed a chip. It's not a GPU, but it's really an accelerator for accelerators. As an example, so Argonne National Labs, which I mentioned, they just deployed 2,200 A100 GPUs, right? That's the newest thing available. If you wanted to order that today, you'd be waiting a year, right? So good luck. With 16 of our chips, they were able to take one of their very important workloads and accelerate it 50 times fast, or 50% faster than the 2,200 A100s are able to achieve. So 16 chips versus 2,200, but 50% faster. And so when you're able to do that, what you can do is you can actually save those GPUs, very expensive GPUs, very precious GPUs, for the things they're actually good at, right? Just like you use CPUs for the things that they're actually good at. And so we want to accelerate the accelerators, the GPUs.
It's interesting because the trend in a lot of tech right now, but especially in semiconductors, is disaggregation. I mean, we're seeing, right, the monolithic chipsets are being, you know, disaggregated, networking chips, security chips, you know, of course, the accelerators, you know, you look at what cloud providers like AWS is building with Nitro, you're looking at these DPUs and data and infrastructure processing units. That's the thing. And it sounds like you're sort of following suit right now. You're following that trend line and saying, let's focus on very specific chips for very specific things and outperform by a lot in these particular areas. Now, I got to ask, I think everyone that's watching this is probably asking this question. Okay, you threw numbers out there, by the way, about, you know, Groq versus Nvidia for this specific purpose, where you, performance-wise, are saying you blew them away in terms. So to me, I guess my question is, you know, in a time when this is so critical and companies are trying to streamline costs, they're trying to create efficiencies, they're trying to, of course, get more out of their data. I mean, why would this not just land immediately and everybody be clamoring for it? And I'm sure you're getting some demand. I mean, you're already saying customers are signing up, but I mean, this seems like a no-brainer. What's the, you know, with this level of performance, why wouldn't everybody be signing up?
So I think the way to think about it is, why don't people use GPUs for everything, right? The majority of silicon shipped today is still CPUs. And the reason is there are a lot of things that CPUs are better at, right, than GPUs are. The CPU is actually faster. there are things that GPUs are faster at, and there are things that our chip is faster at. And we've been discovering that along with the customers. But we actually had a call just this week where there was a customer who put in an order for GPUs. They couldn't get it fulfilled in the time that they needed it. And it was an enormous number of GPUs that they needed. And the expectation is that a much smaller number of our chips would be able to solve their problem. And so that connection had to be made, but the connection wasn't made by that customer. It wasn't made by us. We didn't know how to find each other. What happened was a mutual vendor, a vendor that was blocked by the fact they couldn't get their GPUs, introduced us, because by introducing us, we could solve that customer's problem, and therefore we could get that customer deployed much more quickly with that vendor.
But so it sounds to me like some of the challenge may merely just be that Groq isn't necessarily a first name on a list of knowns by the traditional buyers right now that are buying GPUs to do workload acceleration or AI projects. But that obviously, as you start to win deals, you mentioned Argonne earlier. I imagine that's not the only deal. You're starting to get into more deals, and you're going to be able to say, hey, first of all, it sounds like you can coexist very successfully with the big CPUs and even other GPU makers that, that have other specific benefits, and be working almost side by side as an accelerated accelerator. Are there other examples? Are you seeing other instances where you're getting this kind of performance and you're starting to, doors are opening up and Groq's being brought in?
Yeah. So in one case, for example, there's a CPU manufacturer who actually brought us into a deal because they didn't have any other way to solve the customer's problem. There is a large data center company that has done the same. And we seem to be able to complement what they're offering in a way that no other options can.
Yeah, that to me is going to be one of the telltale signs, is when basically you're able to be kind of first in line to be brought in. We often talk about the fact that, the race to be, number two in the AI space is a wide open race right now. And, of course, some of your performances may be number one in some areas. And that, of course, is the great thing about this business, is it's pretty binary, Jonathan. It's not like one of those things where, I always say, like in some sports, I'll just use a sports now, like soccer or football, who's the best player on the field? Well, that's typically pretty subjective, right? But in a track meet, it's pretty binary. You run the race, right? And whoever got to the line first is the fastest. And I think when it comes to performance in AI and accelerators and GPUs, performance will speak itself. Of course, revenue, they might be number one by revenue, and it may not always be number one by performance, but it sounds to me like that's what you're setting out to do, be number one by performance when it comes to the particular workloads that you guys are trying to really gain market traction in.
Well, and to be fair on that, you made a comment about, is it just that we're not a household name? Is it hard to match us, right? And there are workloads where we get 100x. There are workloads where we get 10x. There are workloads where we're at par with a GPU. So why wouldn't you go with the household name? Which is why one of the things that we've committed to, because we have limited resources, is that if we know of a better solution for a customer than our own product, we will tell them, right? We just want to be that trusted voice. And right now, there is so much noise in this industry, it's incredibly hard to find out what's actually going on and what can solve your problem, right? And there's only one company that benefits from that, that's Nvidia. Because if you don't understand what is available and what you can use, you're just going to go with the thing you've heard about. So we're trying to reduce the level of noise. And if that means that another company gets that business, that's fine. There's more than enough to go around, right? But the supply constraint issue is a little bit artificial. I think it's just hard for people to make the connections to the better products.
Yeah, and I think that's, a high integrity way to operate. And of course, a lot of credit to Nvidia for the successful franchise the company's been able to build, but it's also innovation and competition is critical to our ecosystem. I always say it's an imperative that the leaders are being competed with at scale, because if not, then we won't get the innovation we need. We need the challenge in the market to constantly be there. Companies like yours challenging the incumbents to push them to develop better products, and of course, open doors.
And a great example of that was back when developing the TPU at Google. Nvidia wasn't anywhere close to 100 teraops, and they didn't think it was possible, and we couldn't get anything from them that was that fast. We built that chip, and then they followed. And same with Groq. We built a petaop chip, and now they're trying to build petaop chips. I'm sure that what we release next, they will try and copy. And so we're really helping to pull this entire industry forward.
Well, that's a pretty big deal. So to me, like I kind of alluded to before, Jonathan, if you have the opportunity and the cost is right and the efficiency and the performance are all there, it seems kind of like no brainer. Like, why would you not, right? If it's available, if it works, if it's not exponentially.
No one ever got fired from buying from IBM, right?
Yeah, but
so what it takes is some sort of structural issue, like supply chain crisis. I can't do what I've always done. I have to solve this problem, and therefore I'm now going to look at other options. And so we're looking at a lot of companies. Actually, what's interesting, many of the companies that we're finding are very interested in our product are the ones that are actually suffering the most in this financial situation that everyone's finding themselves in. The ones that are rolling in dough, they're fat and happy. They can do whatever they've done. The ones that are struggling to make their margins are the ones that are talking to us because they don't have an option. They have to do something that's better.
Well, and at this particular inflection point in the market, like you said, talent may become more accessible. Companies are going to be looking for new options. You know, the Groq, the cloud offering, for instance, to give customers another way to consume in a more, OpEx fashion as opposed to the CapEx investment. To your point, if it takes 200 of one option and 10 of another, the economics have to play a part, especially if performance-wise, all things are equal. So kind of wrapping this up, though, it sounds obvious to me, but is it a limitation of how much you can build? Is it a limitation of how much awareness is out there? And as you're meeting new customers, are you meeting resistance, or is it like once they see how this works, it's game on? I mean, what is sort of, the constraints to seeing Groq be where it's at to being, because like you said, the gap in the revenue size between you and the whole market there's a lot of gap for you to catch up, and a lot of opportunity. So what's it going to take?
So if we were to approach every single customer and try and sell them, and they all said yes, we wouldn't be able to deliver that supply. We're just not a large enough company to do that. And so right now our focus has been, let's take the customers where we've got 1,000x, 100x, or some sort of very large multiple, because architecture is pretty fundamentally different. And then focus on them, because that allows us to have the largest impact on the market, and it allows us to have the largest impact given the amount of silicon supply that we can get. And so that means that we're focused, right? But we're going to be building out from that over time. And that's just going to take iteration time. But if you are stuck, if you have a problem, like where we're seeing a lot of success, any sort of RNNs, any sort of, your audience may not know what these are. So recursive neural nets, graph neural nets, any sort of NLP models. These are areas where we're doing a lot better than GPUs. And if you're limited, you can come to us. Cybersecurity is another big one where we've been doing particularly well. And we can solve these problems better than the existing GPUs.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a pretty exciting time. It sounds to me like to some extent it's going to be your own little economy of supply and demand, that you can't fully release the power of Groq to the market yet, because if a real wave of interest came in, you would have to disappoint some people. But if I'm catching what you're saying right, is you've effectively identified some specific workloads that your performance is exponentially better than what's available in the market. And you are able to deliver that now. The data from the test and the benchmarks will prove it. It's not marketing, it's science. And in the end, I guess you'll start to deliver. That creates scale. And then over time, you'll work your way from the 1,000x to the 100x to eventually the 50x, which, by the way, are all big numbers. You can say like, oh, it's only 10 or only 50. Well, in a training exercise, 10 times or 50 times faster with a big set of data for something like NLP or a neural network, that's pretty darn big. So 1,000 is massive, but let's not belittle all the work that you've already done to even hit 10 or 50x.
Yeah, and I think you said that this is about performance, and really it's not. So what matters is being able to take the workload that you're working on, whatever program you're developing or application you're developing, and to be able to put it into production. And what you want is a product that allows you to do that. If you can't get the silicon, you can't do that. If you can't write the software, you can't do that. If it's too hard to maintain in production, or it's not reliable enough, or any of these other things, then you can't take your workloads and put them into production. So people aren't buying chips. They're buying a path to deploying their applications into production, right? It's developer velocity. And that's all that matters, because right now, the one thing that's more supply constrained than silicon is actually engineers, especially ML developers. And so if you can get more out of the ML developers that you hire, then you're going to be able to achieve a lot more than you otherwise could.
What do they say? People, processes, systems, and technology, or people, you know what I'm saying? Like, it kind of sounds like the amalgamation of all these things are going to be the limiting factor, or the, you know, catapult of scale for the future in this particular space. Jonathan, I want to thank you so much for joining me at this year's 6.5 Summit. I'm really excited to kind of get a year out and see where things are at, because one thing is for sure, I talk to so many companies, and the demand for AI, the demand for data in this economic potential downturn, things like automation, things like artificial intelligence, the utilization of data at scale is going to be the key to helping companies weather the storm. And then beyond that, just whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's national security, whether it's supply chains, whether it's education our children get, the drugs that we discover to solve the next pandemic, all of this is going to be backed by the types of technologies and the problems that you're trying to solve. So keep going. Thank you so much, Jonathan. And let's have a conversation sooner than a year from now.
Thanks. And as a little bit of a call to action here, we're here to help. We're open for business. If you need any help, it doesn't even have to be our silicon. We just want the relationship. We want to talk to you. We want to help you. And that's it. That's what we're here for. Absolutely.
So check it out. Definitely going to be links in the YouTube show notes when they're out there, but not hard to find the Groq, right? The Groq, Groq. You search it, it'll find you for sure. So thanks again for tuning in, everybody. And Jonathan, thanks for joining me. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me.